Hello, all, and welcome to my presentation on domestic violence. So, domestic violence is happening in homes every day, and it is very important to learn intervention and prevention techniques to respond to it effectively. It is a very difficult situation to be a part of, and most of the time, the person who is being abused feels like they cannot escape due to the relationship that they have with the abuser. So the goal of this project is to give the reader an understanding of what exactly is domestic violence and how to recognize the signs and prevent it from escalating with intervention and prevention programs mentioned in research studies that I found. And it is also important to understand that domestic violence happens more than you might think. So it is important to help in any way that you can whenever you can. So, domestic violence is also otherwise known as intimate partner violence. Intimate partner violence happens between two people who are in a close relationship, and this might include former or current spouses or partners. According to a book that I found called Domestic Violence Source Book, intimate partner violence has four types of behaviors: physical violence, sexual violence, threats of physical or sexual violence, and emotional abuse. So these behaviors mentioned before are described in the book as physical violence is when a person hurts or tries to hurt a partner by hitting, kicking, or any other type of physical force. Sexual violence is forcing a partner to take part in a sex act when the partner does not consent. Threats of physical or sexual violence include the use of words, gestures, weapons, or other means to communicate the intent to cause harm. And emotional abuse is threatening a partner or his or hers possessions or loved ones, or harming a partner's sense of self worth. And it's also important to know that domestic violence usually starts with emotional abuse and grows into physical or sexual assault. Different behaviors included in domestic violence can happen all together. Domestic violence is a serious issue all over the world. In the United States, it's considered a public health problem. Close to 3 in 10 women and 1 in 10 men in the US have encountered rape, physical violence, and or stalking relating to domestic violence from someone that they have or had a close relationship with. Domestic violence results in 2,340 deaths in 2007. Close to three quarters of them were women. Of course, it is important to mention that, like many social issues, victims of domestic violence do not report it to authorities, peers, or family due to the common fear of thinking that they will not believe them or that they will put them in danger as well. So the book also addresses the cycle of abuse. This is often separated in three parts: the tension building phase, acute battering episode, and the honeymoon phase. The tension can arise from common issues like money, children, different views, or jobs. Verbal abuse can come from this, which leads to the victim trying to control the situation by agreeing with the abuser, but this does not stop the abuse from happening. This is when the physical abuse begins, which leads to the acute battering episode. This is when it becomes beyond the victim's control and difficult to stop. The honeymoon phase happens after. This is when the abuser tries to apologize for their behavior due to feeling shame. They apologize by expressing remorse and by making their abuse seem smaller than it is. Sometimes they might even try and blame it on the partner, which sadly leads the victim to believe it and not want to tell anyone even more. The abuser will try to convince the victim that it will not happen again. The victim believes them, and then this is when the cycle starts again and continues over and over. The false promises during the honeymoon phase is a fundamental part to the cycle because it gives the victim the false belief that the relationship will be all right. It is important to note that not all violent relationships go through this exact cycle, but most do resemble it. So, one of the class connections that I made to um, domestic violence is the chapter that we read on aggression. Domestic violence is a social issue because the abuser is performing an act of aggression. To perform an act of aggression, there must be two people, therefore, it is a social behavior. According to our course textbook, aggression is defined as a behavior that harms someone who does not want to be harmed. Aggression is intentional, and within a domestic relationship, any violence and aggression towards the victim is intentional. Early in the semester, we learned about forms of aggression. Domestic violence includes physical aggression, verbal aggression, and relational aggression that all happen in a direct way of aggression. Um, a theory that was discussed also in the textbook that might explain but no way justify aggression is domestic violence relationship is frustration aggression theory. According to the textbook, frustration is an unpleasant emotion that arises when a person is being blocked from achieving a goal. The theory was summarized in two bold statements. The occurrence of aggressive behavior always presupposes the existence of frustration, and the existence of frustration always leads to some form of aggression. Within the context of domestic violence, the abuser most likely has some sort of frustration in relation to the victim and directly lashes it out on them with physical abuse. So, unfortunately, most times when domestic violence does happen, children are involved in some type of way, whether they are the reason for the frustration or get caught in the middle of the violence that has nothing to do with them. It can cause them to have psychosocial issues. According to a study conducted on Jamaican adolescents, parent child corporal punishment and interadult violence would be associated with the Jamaican adolescents' problematic adjustment, and the parent child and that the parent child and interadult verbal aggression would be more detrimental to adolescents' psychosocial uh, outcomes than physical violence. Violence within the home of an adolescent does not lead to dating aggression in their own relationships, according to a research study conducted on 8th and ninth grade adolescents. Although it might lead them to have more difficulty creating relationship with others, it does not necessarily mean that they will be violent within whatever relationship they form in the future. So in class, we also spoke about intimate relationships. Domestic violence happens between two people that possibly once had a caring, intimate relationship. According to our course textbook, in intimate relationships, the well-being and psychological process of a one individual are intertwined with the same process in another person. Not surprisingly, therefore, successful intimate relationships are characterized by high levels of trust, knowledge, commitment, and intimacy. When those characteristics starts lacking, tensions arise that can lead to domestic violence. Also, it is possible that the victim continuously forgives the abuser due to their intimate relationship in the past and the hope that it can go back to that. Time and time again, we see that it does not go back to the intimate relationship that they once had, and it instead just worsens with every battering episode. As a result of them holding on to the intimate relationship, they become hesitant to report the domestic violence. So, due to the intimate relationships, women underreport violence and blame themselves more than male victims. According to the article Domestic Violence and Intimacy, what the relationship therapist needs to know. The single most frequent reason why intimate partners do not report assaults was that they were judged to be a private matter. There were, however, gender differences. When invited to self report, men were more than three times more likely than women to acknowledge violence against themselves, and yet men still accounted for only a third of reported abuse. Furthermore, women suffer whether they report or not. Women, rather than male victims, perceive the violence as having particularly adverse emotional effects on them and their relationships. It is particularly interesting to see the differences in how the different genders come to the decision to report domestic violence and how they react to them doing so. When it comes to intervention and prevention programs, I think the best method is through workshops targeted towards adolescents and young adults, educating them on the signs within their own relationships and the relationships around them. This is to help them and prevent them from either becoming the abuser or the victim in future relationships. One example of a prevention program that is targeted towards adolescents is called Family for Safe Dates. It can also be used for any population. It includes 6 booklets that are mailed to home with dating abuse prevention information and activities that parents and adolescents can do at home. Activities include role plays, puzzles, games, scenario analysis, and discussion questions. Another intervention program, which focuses more on the woman and a child who are suffering from the aftermath of domestic violence. This intervention program is called the Talking to My Mom Project, that includes activities to support the change process after domestic violence. Creative processes are needed to support women and children if they were to feel safe and supported in strengthening their relationship in the aftermath of the violence. This program stood out to me because it focused on also strengthening the relationship between the parent and child instead of only making sure that they were okay and safe after the domestic violence. As for an intervention program for the abusers themselves, it has been found that when they are convicted of committing domestic violence, the program they are sent to is called Batterer Intervention Program. It does not show any direct improvement. This program focuses on changing attitudes and beliefs related to domestic violence, but a particular type of BIP did show impact. A counseling-based, non-punitive psychoeducational program for both male and female offenders. It was found that after this program, attitudes known to be associated with nonviolence, including perceptions of accountability, anger management, indications of safety planning, and reported desire for change. Additionally, self-reported levels of psychological and physical violence decreased from pre to post treatment. It is very interesting to see the different outcomes due to less punishment being given to the abuser with this particular type of Batterer intervention program. Overall, domestic violence is a social issue that happens every single day in the households that you would least expect it to happen. It is important to understand why victims stay in the cycle of abuse for so long. Abusers manipulate until they no longer can. Thankfully, public concern over this issue is growing, which is leading to more prevention and intervention programs. Lastly, I will end this program with this. If you or anyone you know is showing signs of being abused by their partner, please speak up. I hope that the one thing that you can take away from this presentation is that maybe it might seem like staying in the relationship will cause it to get better, but it won't. But there is help for the victim, abuser, and the other people affected, like, for example, the children. No one deserves to be abused, even by the person that they are in a relationship with. Every day, more and more intervention programs are emerging to help people affected by this horrible social issue. And that is the end of my presentation. I hope you liked it, and I hope you all have a nice day and nice summer. Bye.